Hello and welcome back to the Digital Marketing Podcast. My name is Kieran Rogers.
I'm Louise Crossley.
And I'm Daniel Rolls.
And today, listeners, we have a news digest for you.
So as ever, there has been a lot going on in the world of digital marketing. We've just done an episode on ChatGPT, so we're going to try not to talk about that in this episode. We're going to talk about a load of other things. So there's lots going on, but AI is going to form part of this because there's lots of other stuff going. Yeah, no, you love it. You started off hating it, then you got quite excited about it. Then I should say, off camera, Kieran is proper ranty about the seismic changes in society that are coming.
Don't go there.
So yeah, exactly. So we're holding him back. We're not going to get into
cheap
that.
way of splitting the atom.
Yeah, exactly.
You just can't, there's always stuff going on though. You can't not talk about it.
Yeah, that's it. So I'm interested in this one because this has got the whole SEO world up in arms, wildly speculating. Google came through and kind of gave some examples of what they think AI-assisted search is going to look like. And they've gone through and released Bard, which is their equivalent of ChatGPT more broadly, so anyone can access that now. I went down a bit of a rabbit hole with this because I hadn't come across, I don't know if you had, Search Labs.
I'd heard of it, but...
Yeah, right. Yeah. I don't know how this had passed me by. Everyone's going to be going, of course we heard of it. It's your job to set the stuff date, Daniel, and you haven't... I didn't have a clue. So basically, you could sign up to Search Labs and they will test stuff on you. So they go, we're running an experiment. That might never actually come to fruition. It might not be something that's going to be used in the real world. But you can go into Search Labs as ever. There's a lot of stuff with links today. So targetinternet.com/podcast, and you'll find all these links. But they've got examples of what they're suggesting it might look like. Now, from my experience of looking at Google experiments, just because they showed something doesn't mean it might look like that at all. And actually, from a user point of view, I looked at it and went, I really don't want this. It's just more stuff at the top of the page that I'm going to scroll past because I've already found it. And if you've played around with it, but if you go in to use Bing and you've got the chat interface, first of all, I was really excited about it and I started using it and I've now just stopped using it completely. It's not really what I was hoping for at all. And I kind of think the same thing could happen with this. It's just, you can scroll past the ads, scroll past the map, scroll past the questions. Oh, great, I've got the organic results. We might end up with that behavior still. But essentially, it's really worrying the SEO world because if the standard results is not just a list of websites anymore, how are you going to bring your data up? And actually, if Google is taking stuff from your website and putting it into the search result and people don't even get to your website anymore, how's that going to work? And we're back to like the Google News thing, right? When Google News was taking other people's news and all the publishers were up in arms saying, wait a minute, we're doing all this journalism and then you're getting all the benefit from it and selling ads off the top of our stuff. So I don't know where this is going, but I think it's going to be pretty significant a change.
The SEO world, in fact, any world, gets very upset when the rules change. And the rules are always changing on this. And a lot of SEO relies on the fact that actually I can organise and structure things in a certain way to take advantage of big audiences. When AI is like segmenting things down to audiences of one, i.e. personalised results to you, Louise, or you, Daniel, just based on your previous preferences, or even based on the prompts that you've given it. You haven't begun to, we're very lazily, we just slap some words in and we expect it to come up. But if I can give it prompts and talk to it and say, don't give me maps and I want this or I want that, then suddenly the number of like different routes you can go through, that makes it very difficult for SEOs to work out some general algorithms, some general recipes to harvest that because it's a very kind of split apart audience. So I think that's part of the challenge really. But it's going to just because the rules are changing, get with it. Like you have built success on that hack. Well, we've had lots of hacks in the past that were amazing. No, I know, right? I agree. And then the door closes on them. It's like, that's
the job.
Just move on.
What's fascinating is that it was always going to get to this point where there's an algorithm. That algorithm was changing more and more frequently. Well, actually, if there's machine learning, the algorithm will be in a constant state of flux now, and you won't be able to. Now, I always say this: SEO's dead. Okay, and I love putting that in a conference because it upsets so many people on Twitter.
It's
still
controversial.
Yeah, I've been doing the same thing for 15 years, and I've been getting away with it. So it's cheap publicity. So basically, what I mean, and I always mean by SEO is dead, is that the more advanced the algorithms become, the less you should be thinking about them, and the more you think about your target audience. Because all the Google algorithm has done over the years is try and understand, does the user like this or not? Dwell time. core web vitals, page load speed. It's just all signals that go, is this a good experience or not? So that's what you need to focus on.
But that's marketing, isn't it? It's like marketing should always be focused on what people want.
Yeah.
It doesn't care what you want.
No, that's
For your
just
customer,
irrelevant.
not to your customer.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, I see. She's been listening to you, Kieran. So yeah, I'm amazed. So, I said I went down a bit of a rabbit hole with this. So a couple of things I found. Search Lab's really interesting. Blog.google is something called The Keyword. And it's their kind of blog, but it talks about what they're up to. I hadn't come across this at all somehow. I'd looked at the Google blogs, the webmaster blogs and stuff, but it's called The Keyword. So you go blog.google. Now, something I came across I hadn't seen in a while, completely off on a tangent.
I love this.
Have you looked at Project
I looked
Starline?
at it this morning.
Yeah, so
It's come a
Project
long way.
Starline was telepresence. Okay, so the idea is we're sitting opposite now. I can see your gestures, I can see your face, all that kind of stuff.
You'd be in 3D.
Yeah. But actually, it's just a screen that sits opposite me on a table. So as if we were sitting each other out, but it's super high resolution, 3-dimensional. It's kind of like you're in the room. And I saw the previous version years ago and I was like, yeah, I'd rather do a Zoom call. And then looking at this version, you're like, that is pretty cool. That is really, really good. There are other people that are doing this, but I think what they've kind of realized is that there's limitations to a little tiny square in a Zoom call. Whereas actually, if you need to have a important meeting, like two politicians meeting from different countries in different parts of the world, you could do that and you'll get the gestures, you'll get that intimacy that you get from a face-to-face meeting.
Was this like the avatars?
No, it's slightly different. So with this, it is just literally a film of you opposite each other.
Yeah.
But it's a technology that just screens and depth of field and detail and resolution,
Right,
all those
okay.
kind of things. And it sits opposite you, so it's spatial audio and those kind of things. It just does make you feel like you're with that person in the room.
With the early iterations, you needed gear like the size of the room to generate, so it was quite restrictive. But actually, using AI, according to their blog, they've been able to boil that down into actually just some simple multiple cameras and AI to stitch it all together in it, and now works. And now it's much more in a it looks like a display, right?
Yeah,
It's
it does look like a monitor.
display.
So I think it's really interesting.
I love that. We'll link to the video on it. It's a lovely bit there where a guy who's been using it, and they've had lots of people at big companies like Salesforce have been beta testing this for them and actually using it in the workplace. And he just comes out with, and I couldn't believe it. Like, we've been Zooming for ages, for months. But I used this for the first time and I realised he had blue eyes. It's like that. But this is kind of beautiful, I think, because actually it shows you that truism that I've always believed in, which is people like people. Yeah. Really, like, it matters to us, like subtle inferences in how people communicate and speak. Like, on the way over to record this, I was sat in the airport just watching people, and there are so many clues and inferences that you pick up. So I can observe another conversation or another event happening in someone else's life and pick up loads of information from that. If you were just seeing a screen, you would never get.
And I always feel from a training point of view, this is going to become quite interesting because Zoom training and online training will get you so far, but you don't get some of the special magic that you get when you're in the room with someone. So I still love doing face-to-face training. But actually with this, suddenly it could get a bit more interesting with this as well. So yeah, have a look at that anyway.
The world is becoming a smaller place.
It is, which is fantastic. Okay. So while I was doing this, some other Google tools that have been updated, and I thought this was interesting, is Google Colab, so as in collaboration. What it allows you to do is to easily write Python code. Okay, so if you want to generate code, it was really useful for generating Python code. Only of interest to you if you're a developer and all that kind of stuff. But they've started adding AI technology to it. So just like ChatGPT can write Python code for you, this can write the code for you, but it has things like autocomplete. So you start writing a line of code and it will complete it for you. It will suggest what the next step's going to be. You can write, and I want the code to do X, and it will generate it, but it's in an environment that helps you code. So actually, it's a really nice interface. So if you want to learn to code, or you want to try and generate some code, for example, to plug something in with an API and you get the expertise, brilliant, really easy. I had to play around with it and I haven't coded. So if people know my history, back in the day, I studied computer engineering, computer science. I was a coder, and then I fell into marketing because I was a bad coder. Okay, I was never really all that good at it. But
that doesn't matter now.
no, it doesn't matter. Well, that's the thing. So, and what Brad, who's our lead developer, was saying is that it just speeds up some of the process of the basic stuff, and he can focus on the more complicated things. So it's a tool. So have a look at that if you're interested. Next one, this was really interesting to me. I was at a conference yesterday, and there was someone talking about digital audio, and podcasts obviously came up a lot. And what was interesting is looking, we keep talking about the growth of podcasts and think eventually this has got to really slow down. But if anything, what we saw during COVID was a real dive in people listening to podcasts because they stopped commuting and then suddenly they started consuming them in a different way. When they're working in the office, walking the dog, going to the gym, well, they're doing other stuff, right? And actually still listening to someone's voice, there's something about it that's kind of different to all the other digital channels. And this little quote came through from the IAB's, the Internet Advertising Bureau, and PwC. So podcasting ad revenue grew 26% year on year in 2022, according to reach $1.8 billion, as against the rate of growth of digital ads generally, which is about 11%. So 26%
more
versus
than double.
Yeah, it's huge, right? And I think what was interesting is that it's a channel that's getting more and more consumption, more and more people's media time. But also, there are smarter ways of targeting ads now. So if you're listening on certain platforms, there's a great thing they were doing is saying, look, if you're listening to a fashion blog, then listening to a fashion podcast, sorry, it's really unlikely that a travel company would want to place an ad in that necessarily. But now what they're doing, using some technology from Oracle, is going through, listening to what's being said. And if people that are in a fashion blog happen to be talking about travel plans, they can drop in an ad that's related to travel. So it's actually going through, working out what's being said and adding in ads at the right kind of point as well. They can also use real-time data. So they can go through and do it so that you could do a travel ad and you could say, you could be in this place where it's pouring with snow right now and you could be skiing and whatever it might be, based on what the weather's actually like at the moment and where you are physically and what your nearest airport is and all those kind of things. This is all lovely. The problem is most people download podcasts, so you can't do that, the way they're streaming them through. So we'll see what happens, but it depends on the platform. But I just think it's a space that people aren't really utilising enough. And I know there are a lot of podcasts out there and you're listening to this, you'll certainly know that. But there's still opportunity in this space to try out different formats and to do interesting things with it, I think.
There is. The danger is it just wrecks the content that you used to enjoy. Like
with the ads?
That whole kind of frequency thing, like really important.
Well, we're ad-free for a reason.
Yeah, and that's why we don't have ads, because we think it would wreck it.
Yeah, and also the ones at the beginning. I mean, I listen to the Tim Ferriss podcast still a lot, and there's always two ads he does. He does them really well at the beginning because it's him talking about products and services he actually likes and he checks them out beforehand and there's always a special offer involved. And I have bought a lot of stuff that he advertises, but invariably I skip the ads. I just hit the 30 second until I know I'm past the ads a lot of the time. So I think a better way of doing it is embedding it in. I mean, just from a practical point of view, this is the Digital Marketing Podcast, brought to you by targetinternet.com. We sponsor our own podcast kind of thing. So it's a brand vehicle for us from that point of view. So yeah, so it's interesting, but there's the growth I thought was quite interesting.
Maybe that's why. Like it's double. They have to throw twice as much money at it because they know a lot of people just skip.
Well, maybe that's not good. It didn't talk about the effectiveness of the ads at all, did it? I guess
because it breaks up the flow of people's listening journey, doesn't it? It's the same way when Netflix were talking about introducing ads, and it's like, well, people sit and they watch episode after episode,
right?
And
TV ads. I mean, I've got in the UK, Channel 4, ITV. I've paid the monthly subscriptions. You don't get ads anymore, and then I'll watch a US TV show. And it will boggle my mind how many ads there are. So we were watching this great thing called Alone. Anyone seen this?
No.
It's an American show. They basically will dump someone in the middle of nowhere, and they'll dump someone else a couple of miles down the road in the middle of somewhere, and they'll go, right, whoever survives the longest wins. And they basically starve to death, and there's always bears.
It's got some health and safety rules.
The health and safety is pretty bad. So they medevac people all the time. Right. Anyway, go and have a look. Off on a tangent, but I love this show. You watch it and you suddenly realise, because I haven't got the ads, but you go, there's like an ad break every 8 minutes. So it does ruin your enjoyment of stuff. So yeah, be careful with this thing. Right, on ads, third-party cookies depreciation. Let me start off with a bit of framing, and then Kieran's going to give you a bit of depth. That's generally it, isn't it? I just give the shallow, and you just
not
you know the depth of things.
If only you knew the truth.
Yeah, that's it, right? So third-party cookies. Little bit of clarification. You go to a website, on a news website, you see an ad. Generally, the cookie that's then being set on your machine to track you isn't the first party. It's not the news website. It's not the second party, it's not the advertiser, it's the ad network. And in many cases, that's the GDN, the Google Display Network, across 3 million websites now, okay, that reaches 97% of us. I always love those stats. Since what year was they started announcing this?
2020.
So 2020, they came out and said,
3 years ago,
we're going to move away from using third-party cookies because, privacy and people aren't that comfortable with them and so on as well. They've just announced that in Q1 of 2024, okay, 2024, 4 years after that, they're going to depreciate 1% of all third-party cookies. They're going to switch them off, basically 1% of us
So
to
who's
go
they in
Google.
this? Okay.
Google, okay. And them just saying, we're going to stop it at 1% to see if it works. But do you know why they're worried about this? Because all their revenue comes from ads. Not all of it, but an awful lot of it. And actually, if you haven't got the technology they're currently using to track things, they could lose a huge amount of revenue. They already, because of they're losing a lot of cookies because Safari blocking third-party cookies, they've already moved to a machine-based learning model for Google Ads in some cases, which we've spoken about previously. So those Performance Max campaigns. Okay, just one little note, something I came across that will be useful for the audience. You're in GA4, and if you're not yet, come on, you've got like a month, well, whatever it's by the time this
there's a
comes out.
countdown timer now. Have you seen it?
Yeah, you go into Universal Analytics, you get a countdown half the screen.
Times Square
yeah,
style.
Yeah, literally, like the world will end when this gets
We're
to
doing
zero.
another training course in June as well.
Oh, very good, yeah.
So just
plug.
before Universal Analytics sunsets.
targetinternet.com/GA4, and you will find that training course. They've been going really well, actually. I enjoy doing those. But with this, what you're actually kind of seeing is that you go into GA4 and you look at your traffic sources, and I've got organic search and I've got direct traffic, all this new stuff. And there's some new ones starting to appear that are really confusing. And you point out the channel groupings to me. First of all, organic shopping. I was like, why have we got organic shopping? We're not on Etsy or anything like that. What is this? It was Stripe. So first of all, it's like, okay, that's our payment process. We need to put that in a URL exclusion list. That was one. The other one was cross-network. I was like, what on earth is cross-network? And it's basically if you're running these Performance Max campaigns, it doesn't want to tell you where you get your clicks from because otherwise you could detangle their algorithm a bit. So it just says it was cross-network. Not telling you where it came from, but it came from one of these ads.
Great.
So just be aware of that. So that's out there.
Hours of my time explaining that to senior people in different businesses.
You don't-
Well, yeah, but what is this? Oh, because there's a lot of spend, there's a lot of results, but what is it? Well,
It's some stuff.
black box.
Yeah.
They're
Now,
not going to tell us.
I was running a GA4. So I went over to the UK to a university that I've worked with a lot. I was doing a live thing and they just went, what's that? And I was like, I have no idea. One moment. And then it took a little bit of research and they were like, and you see, whenever you do a training course and you say that, some people are like, brilliant, he's being really honest.
Yeah.
And some people are like, why are we paying him? So that wasn't a glorious moment. And GA4 is doing that to me a lot at the moment because they keep changing things.
Yeah.
They do.
So it's slightly painful. Anyway, back to third-party cookies.
Yeah.
I digress as normal. You got some stats from Adobe?
Yeah, so, well, I just think that this has been the elephant in the room for a while.
Okay.
Really. Like Google, 60% of the world's internet users using Chrome, more than 60%.
Right.
I don't know what the latest stat is, but it's big. So them removing third-party cookies is a massive, massive step. And at the moment, like Google always previously claimed that their early sandbox systems, like that PR comes out and says the new model worked almost as well. as our third-party. Almost as well. It's like, and this is the issue. Right, Adobe did some research back in March, and we'll put links in the show notes to all this so you can reference it. And their data showed that nearly 4/5 of brands still rely heavily on third-party cookies. Right, so actually, it's like brands.
I have a point with this.
Yeah, go on.
Rand Fishkin's been talking about this for a while, and you started talking about this a few years ago, and it's like you can't measure stuff. Like, what do you mean you can't measure stuff? No, in digital we can measure everything. That's the whole point.
Yeah.
And more. The measurement's less precise. I was trying to explain Google signals. Like GA4, one of the things you turn signals on. What's that? That's them vaguely trying to add things together and work out what's going on. Like they're using your Google account as you logging into your Google account on multiple devices as a kind of, they know it's you and all that kind of stuff. So actually machine learning involved, bit of a black box, but less and less you can necessarily be exact with your measurement. And actually what we should get back to is great creative user focus. We're back to advertising in the 1950s and 60s.
It's a really important point, though, because I do think that potentially they're trying to solve a problem that's already been solved.
Right.
Like if everybody's private and you can't stalk them and follow out and know exactly what they've been looking at and target them, how can we possibly make this work? So you've got all these brands who are like, well, we can't get anything better than the third-party cookie data. We've got big companies like Google and other ad networks and they're actually all collaborating on this now, which is the exciting thing. Like, there's a lot of collaboration going on. They're all trying to solve this problem, but actually, we never had this. Like, go back 20 years when I started, never had any of this. And how did you do it? Well, you knew who your market was, and you did good old-fashioned market research, and you knew what
might resonate with them, right?
Yeah, and you looked at what your competitors were doing, and you did all this like complex stuff, and you came out with these brilliant strategies informed by actual data and actual hard graph. And I think, although we have moved on since then a lot, there is a halfway house between what we've got now and those skills, and you can apply that and still win without having to wait and rely on the Google for doing it. Because here's the thing: if I'm completely reliant on Google to do all of this stuff for me, then they're the middleman that I've got to pay.
Yeah, and also if they change anything, you're kind of challenged by that.
I'm hooked on the Kool-Aid.
Yeah, vendor. You're really vendor specific.
So there's a real argument for this, that actually traditional marketing skills that I think have been neglected for a long time. We're all of us guilty of neglecting direct mail. When in today's modern world, we've got CRM systems, we've got data on our customers that we've never had before. We don't have to do a one-size-fits-all blast. We can micro-segment, and we can do like direct mail in some really creative ways. And we've got some interesting interviews lined up shortly to kind of look at how some organisations are tackling this. So that's the first thing. I think there's potentially a real renaissance. So if you're feeling a little bit of a dinosaur and you study traditional marketing, you've got a whole set of really useful skills because you already know how to solve this problem.
So I think people forget as well, no matter how much technology you get involved in, no matter how much AI develops, all marketing, whether it's B2B or B2C, is all still human to human.
It's about people.
And sometimes you just need to strip it back.
I also think with this, the creative, I've kind of said this before, that you need to focus on brand in times of lack of trust. In times of lack of ability to micro-target, you need to focus on creative. In the great creative, there was an example yesterday I was looking at. So it's this conference, and then you always stay a bit afterwards to watch the presentations after yours. So some really good stuff. And this guy was saying, we need to get back to basics, and actually creative, the difference between this, which was okay, and this, which is beautifully designed and so on as well, actually 2,500% better results. Like, whoa, okay, yeah, that suddenly, he said, why are you spending all this money just to blast this rubbish out to people? Is actually, if you did great creative, and actually really great creative, you don't even need to pay. Because if you think about those amazing ad examples, and there's just like really clever ads, Guinness do them quite regularly, where you'll just see, that's visually really simple, but really clever, but really playful. That's the stuff that cuts through. So actually, I would be inclined to cut budget on spend and put that on ad spend and put that into creative, and all the creative agencies out there are going, yeah!
It's a hybrid approach. Though. Yeah, it's not, don't put all your eggs in one basket.
That's always been the case.
It is. You've got to join the dots, other people aren't joining. You can't just expect everybody to use Google's new system and everybody wins. No, it doesn't work like that. So I think there's an opportunity there to explore that. What I've also been digging into some of the iterations of this. So we had Flock, which, as I understood it, was loosely based on what you've been doing in the previous 3 weeks on Google-owned properties. And from that, they'd be able to surmise, actually, looking at the YouTube videos you've been looking at the search. Like for Google, that's all first-party data that they can effectively mine and make available. That clearly didn't work so well. And I think there were some issues with it, like retaining the privacy principles that it was originally designed. It didn't quite. There was a few grey areas there, as I understand it.
Yeah, right.
Then we moved on to Fledge. What was Fledge? So first, locally executed decisions over groups experiment.
Rolls off the tongue.
It really does, really snappy.
It's easy to remember that.
And I got really interested in this because this was like a framework that they built around a proposal that they put in. So they had this proposal for how are we going to solve this privacy first world and still do this stuff, right? And they came up with this thing called Turtle Dove, which was a proposal of 3 principles. And all these things like Flock and Fledge, they're all trying to implement this proposal, right? So those 3 things are, and they're really interesting because it begins to get your head, like the PR is not getting your head around the detail behind this, but this helped me do that, right? So listen up to this. So one of the golden rules here is browsers may hold users' behavioral data. Oh, okay. That's how you're getting the
So I
across
store
the
my
third party.
behavioural data,
Yes, you do.
and then I can grant people to access it or not.
In a way, yeah. But if that behavioural data is stored on your browser
Locally, yeah.
level, then you've got potentially control of that.
Yeah.
That gives the privacy. Also, it means that the network can't abuse that
Yep.
necessarily, right? So that's interesting. Advertisers can use this data, but they cannot combine it with other data collected. And that's been one of the big problems with third-party cookie data.
Right.
It can be combined with other data sets for all sorts of nefarious purposes. And then the third thing is the ad networks may not store users' interest data.
This is a real shift.
It's a massive shift, but that's why they're finding it so challenging. And I think potentially the big risk here is if my browser holds my user data, I can withhold access to that. But that's the whole point, isn't it? It's this whole privacy thing. So they've moved on from Fledge now, and it is now so Fledge is the API, right? And it's the API formerly known as Fledge is now called Protected Audience.
It's a bit easier to remember.
Block Fledge Protected Audience.
Protected Audience. Now, why have they changed the name? Well, they felt that Protected Audience better reflected how this now works.
Sounds better.
Well, I don't know. I think that kind of first locally executed decisions thing is. I'm just reading between the lines here.
Yeah.
I think that potentially there was an issue because in order to get this to work well, and that it's this new protected protected audience. That's what they're testing out 1%.
Okay.
Yeah. So watch this space. And the other interesting thing is that they're saying there's loads of APIs coming. Got APIs for topics, protected audience, attribution reporting, private aggregation, shared storage, fenced frames. I know what a lot of these things are.
Well, that's my favourite thing I was going to say.
APIs coming on it. This stuff hasn't been built, so they don't even know how it works. So how they can say that, 2024, middle of 2024, we'll have this all licked. I don't know.
I love you. I just love that your note on here because we read off a coggle. Okay, so what we do, we plan out bullet points. We've got a coggle, and the second bullet point on this very last point says, looks like it's too early to really understand how it works. And you're right, because I went, is it? And it completely is as well. So they know they're going to have to do something. So they're working towards it, but we're not sure. I like the idea of, and we've said this for a while, I own all my data, my privacy, and I can grant you access or not to it as well. There's a lot of discussion about how NFTs and things like that might be evolved because I can encrypt it. I can store it online somewhere safe. It doesn't actually have to be in my browser. I could have it on a network elsewhere, but I've got access to it. I can switch that on and off. So
don't wait for them to solve this.
Yeah.
Start solving it yourself. And my advice would be start looking at some of the traditional marketing techniques and frameworks that we've been using for years, because that was what those things were built to do before we had all of this stuff. And I think there's potentially a real competitive advantage for organizations that aren't overly reliant on any one platform, that aren't overly we've all become too hooked into that. And for me, real wake up call that, geez, Louise, we're spending $5, $8, $12, $15 a click. What the hell?
Yeah.
When actually, what could you do with that money? If you were to actually invest it in your customers, invest it in the experience. Oh my goodness, and we've all stopped doing direct mail because it's too expensive. No, there's a new third way here. There's new opportunities there. And I just wish more marketers would, if you're excited about this, get in touch. Let us know what you're doing with this. I think it's an exciting space because we're not all beholden to the big behemoths anymore.
Well, I'll give you an example. We spend thousands and thousands of pounds every year on ads and tens of thousands, which is not a lot. We've got customers that are spending millions every month. But the reality is, I said, okay, if you look at this over a 6-month period, so we're spending that's £6,000, £1,000 a month on a particular campaign. What if we took that £6,000? What could we do with it? And we had a bit of a play around it, and we went off to an animator and said, right, we want to build some really beautiful, informative, kind of fun, visually stunning animations. And it came back with a quote, and it was £5,000. I was like, okay, I reckon that for £1,000 less than I've been spending on ads, that the return on investment isn't really there. I can create an asset that's going to get a lot more engagement over the longer term. So I think sometimes just thinking about some of those creative things that you could do with it is really interesting, because you're cutting through noise, you're trying to stop the scroll, all that kind of good stuff. Yeah. That's maybe a really good space to invest in.
I was so inspired when I worked at Lizelle. So Lizelle, UK beauty company, and their big founding principle was never spend on advertising.
Yeah, right.
And what did they do? They invested in gift with product, gifts to the customer delight. and it worked a treat. And they grew literally from Liz and Kim's kitchen table. 10 years later, they had a turnover of 50 million. They were employing over 500 staff, and they sold to Avon for an undisclosed amount, but I'm sure it was a good paycheck, right? But that whole business was built on word of mouth, and word of mouth massively trumps any. I don't care who you are. Like, I'll fight you in the street over this. It trumps any AI, because it's the human AI, isn't it? It's the human algorithm. Like, it's that word of mouth. People trust people, and it's always been about giving better service, giving a better product. Why? To service those customers so that they pull more people in. That's like where the seismic growth potentially is for any. That's where the disruption is.
Advocacy, word of mouth. All that kind of stuff.
For sure, a lot of this technology can help us access this, but that is foundational. That is absolutely foundational. And so we should all start waking up, smell the coffee, and look at these big budgets that are going out the door and go, actually, what could we do? Companies will be reluctant to give a discount, too reluctant to give away too much with the product. Yeah, because you're spending too much on advertising. You can't afford to do that. But shift the landscape and see what shakes out. Like, do it small experiments. It doesn't have to be, overnight complete change, but see what works. Do more of what works.
I couldn't agree more. One last quick point, before we close things up. You want all these links, targetinternet.com/podcast, but exactly to Kieran's point, all this stuff's changing. We've got less targeting, and then we've got all this chat stuff showing up in Bard, the stuff on Google, and within the Chat GPT stuff that's being built into Bing. And I was suddenly thinking to myself, is this, we normally have the ads at the top of the page. What's going to happen if the chat's at the top of the page? Well, lo and behold, AI chat ads.
Oh, nice.
So between the chats that you're having, little relevant ads will be built into the chat. And it's like, wait a minute, that's really interruptive. I've got to scroll past that because I'm trying to have a conversation. It's like me and you going, yeah, so we were talking about this thing. Would you like to buy this product? Yeah. And then you just carry it. It just doesn't feel quite right. No. So I think this is it. More noise, more interruption. So actually, you can take a look at it in the show notes, but I think we need to get back to some of it. The renaissance, I think, is a good word that you use.
Just stop doing things to people and start doing things for them.
Okay.
Literally. It's that simple. How many times?
What a beautiful way to finish things up. So just a last thought. We've mentioned this previously. As of June the 23rd, we are opening up nominations for the Digital Marketing Toolkit Awards. So you can go in, you can nominate your own tools that you might be using in this space, anyone else's tools, and then we're going to have a voting period, and we've got some announcements coming up with that as well. So targetinternet.com/toolkit, and you can see nominations open. They open on June the 23rd. As ever, thank you for listening to the Digital Marketing Podcast, and we'll see you next time.
Please subscribe for more videos like this and visit targetinternet.com for more free digital marketing resources.